Good evening and welcome to Orenda Books at Bedtime. I'm Karen Sullivan, publisher of Orenda Books. Tonight we're going to transport you to Bergen to visit with a very special social worker come private investigator, Varg Veum. Yes, it's Gunnar Staaleson's Wolves at the Door. And I'm really excited to introduce you to a special guest tonight. We have Dr. Noir, Jackie Collins, and she's an expert in Scandinavian and in fact international crime fiction, and she's going to tell you a little bit about this book. Over to you, Jackie.
Hi, thank you, Karen. It's a great pleasure to be here this evening with you and to discuss one of my favourite Nordic noir authors. If you haven't read Gunnar Staalesson yet, you have an amazing treat ahead of you. And thank you, Karen, for bringing so many of his stories to us through your crime fiction and translation. I think, if you get hold of Gunnar's books, then you get an amazing grounding in what Nordic noir is all about. And what I really like about Gunnar's work is that it is subtle. He takes you into the heart of his amazing protagonist, Varg Veum, a man who at one point was on the right side of the law, but as a private investigator now, he works on, we could say, the other side of the law, maybe a little bit controversial in the way that he brings about justice and the way that he seeks to do right by those who are victims, through those who need his help. Maybe a hero for our modern times, I think, is Varg Veum.
A vigilante.
A vigilante, indeed. But could I read the back to give people a taste? Would that be all right? I would love to. So, one dark January night, a car drives at high speed towards private investigator Varg Veum and comes very close to killing him. Veum is certain that this is no accident. Following so soon after the deaths of two jailed men who were convicted for their participation in a case of child pornography and sexual assault, crimes that Veum himself once stood wrongly accused of committing. So you can see here that what is happening is something that even goes deeper and deeper into the psyche of this protagonist, Varg Veum. You can be sure that by the end of this novel, you will have been taken on a very deep, dark ride, looking at the heart of evil. But you can be sure, I promise you, that Varg Veum will see that right is done. So thank you, Karen, for inviting me to talk about, as I say, one of my most favourite Nordic noir authors.
Thank you, Jackie. And now let's go to Bergen and to Gunnar Staalesson, reading from Wolves at the Door, which has been translated by Don Bartlett.
Good evening, folks. On one of the lightest day in the year, I send you a greeting from Bergen, Norway, and I will read the first chapter of my last Varg Veum novel in English, Wolves at the Door, and that takes us back to one of the darkest nights in January some years ago. I heard the car before I saw it. I had been on a little job for a married couple who lived in one of the new residential areas at the rear of Lagoon shopping center. They had asked me to park discreetly when I visited them, and I was on my way back down to my Toyota when I heard a snarling engine just behind me. I had enough time to turn around. The vehicle was coming straight at me with no indication that it was going to veer away. For a second or two I was paralyzed. Then I reacted instinctively and hurled myself to the side. The car was so close to me that I felt a rush of air as it passed. I fell into a pile of snow the GCB plows had left during the Yuletide break. Now it was the first Sunday in January and the weather was as cold as it had been since Christmas. What the? I said to myself. My heart pounding, more shocked than frightened. I sat up in the snow and stared at the tail lights of the car racing down at the same breakneck speed. It was much too far away for me to read the registration plate, but in the evening gloom the car looked grey, and if it wasn't much mistaken, it was last year's model of the Volkswagen Golf. I watched the taillights go past the shopping center and out to Fanaveien, where it took a right into Bergen and disappeared behind the hills there. I struggled to my feet and stepped onto the road. I looked up to make sure there were no more cars hurtling down at me and to see whether anyone was out walking who could confirm what had happened. But there was no one in the area between Lagoon and the petrol station before Fanaveien. Hadn't the driver seen me, or had he seen me all too well? In other words, had he intentionally tried to mow me down? Could it have anything to do with the case I had just solved? Hardly. It was so insignificant that the only people who might react to it would be the tax authorities, because my fee was so modest that there was virtually nothing left for them, even included VAT. On the way to my Corolla, it struck me there might be another link, and this worried me. I became even more worried than I had been when I first noticed the two deaths, one in October, the other 2 months later. I had made only a mental note of the first. After the second, I had the suspicion there was something fishy going on. In both obituaries, the surviving families had used the words died suddenly and unexpectedly. And this is what set me thinking. Suddenly and unexpectedly, as in murdered. But there had been no mention of it in the newspapers I had seen. I hadn't met either of the two men, but their names, Per Haugen and Mikael Midtbø, had been seared into my memory. Soon it would be a year and a half since we had, for a few dramatic autumn months, shared a similar fate. All three of us had been accused for the same crime. This was a period of my life I had consciously tried to repress. Now it all came flooding back. When I reached my car, unlocked the door, got behind the wheel and rewound the previous 16 months to the morning when I was woken by the police for what in the course of a few days would develop into the worst nightmare I had ever experienced. And I had been wide awake.
Thank you so much, Gunnar, for reading from this incredible book. Gunnar is one of the fathers of Nordic Noir, and you can do no better than picking up any one of these books, all of which stand alone. Quite incredible. See you next week for another episode of Orenda Books at Bedtime.